So coded.
All right, and now, without any further ado, Hans.
Thanks, guys. Hi. Moin, sagt man ja, glaube ich, hier, ne? Just doing a quick introduction. But you're not from Hamburg. Who's from Hamburg? Awesome, right? Cool. My talk today is about starting front-end projects, as it is up on the screen. And before that, I want to just introduce myself quickly. Maybe I should do a fresh reload. Hope that works now. My name is Christian Reinl. I'm a freelancer, I'm a front-end developer, and I currently live in Freiburg, im Breisgau. Who knows this? Yeah, awesome. This is the city where Smashing Mag is, right? You all have heard of Smashing Mag, I guess. But I will soon move to Cologne, which is a pretty nice city too, I guess. On the internet, my name is Droplik, so if you want to find me on Twitter or GitHub or my blog, just type in Droplik and hopefully you'll find it. There are a couple of projects I do in my spare time. A lot of open source stuff, mostly front-end connected somehow. The most famous one, and this is maybe important for the talk today, is HTML5 Boilerplate. I'm on the team there. One of the developers, one of 5 people who maintain the project at the moment. Who has used HTML5 Boilerplate? Please show your hands. Oh yeah, a couple. The other ones should try it out. I'm doing a weekly web podcast called Working Draft with some colleagues. It's a German thing. You should listen to that because it's pretty awesome. And another awesome project is the Nitty Gritty. It's from me and my friend Khalil Lächelt, Distilled Hype on Twitter. And we do basically the same as we do with the podcast, but in a written form. So if you want to get the latest tech stuff in front end and back end and design and stuff like that, check out the Nitty Gritty. Yeah, the talk today, starting front end projects. Who's a front end developer? Okay. Who does back end? Designers in the room? Marketing people? Oh, okay. Whatever. Anyone else doing something else? What are you doing? Sorry? Mobile. Apps and stuff, I guess. Awesome. Today I want to talk a little bit about the front-end development thingy. There are a couple of topics I want to talk about. The first thing is dry, whatever this means, we will come to that. Then a little bit about boilerplate code, and basically what is the boilerplate that we code for each and every project. How can we maybe reduce this boilerplate code? How can we tackle the problems we face with it? And if we have enough time, I'll be talking a little bit about components and how you can build your project better with components. But let's start a little bit talking about how you start your projects. In most of the cases, when you start your project, you have some code that you start with, or maybe you start from zero, right? And you need to write lines of code and stuff like that, and you have to talk about stuff. And this is the same for each and every project. Mostly, you do basically the same for a lot of projects if you start newer projects and don't maintain them. You do the same tasks for development, deployment, whatever this means. We'll come to that later. But when you work in a team, and I think most people are working in teams today, you need some kind of consistency. Because if there are new developers coming on your team, you want to tell them, hey, we're using this and that and this and that. And you can just jump right in here, read the documentation, and start from there with a new project, for example. The thing is, we spend a lot of time with these things, figuring out what is the good starting point. But we don't want to spend too much time on this, right? It's always like a pain if you have to think about 1 week of your time of the project, just how to set up a good structure for a big web application. And this costs a lot of time, and we want to save this. Currently, when you have some kind of boilerplate code that you use for your projects, it's mostly that you have some kind of framework or something that you did yourself. If you have that, you look at it, what do you need for your current project? What can you remove from it? What do you need to extend? What are the differences of your workflow and your preferences compared to the project that you use? Then you go over this and apply the changes you need to the project, and then the last step is that you start coding with the stuff that you do, that you really want to do, like building a web application or a web page, whatever. I want to talk a little bit about frameworks and boilerplates and what is out there, what is our current starting point when we start with development. First off, there is this very famous framework called Bootstrap. Bootstrap is basically a front-end UI framework that you can just use. I will tell a little bit about the problems with this in a second. Then there is something like Foundation, which is basically similar to Bootstrap, because it has the same UI kit thingy, and you can just use the styles that are there for you that you can use within your projects. And then there are smaller starting points, like, for example, HTML5 boilerplate. HTML5 boilerplate isn't a UI kit. It's just reduced to the minimum, and it's a good basis for you to start coding your UI kit, the UI kit that you need, your front-end library. And then there are more advanced things, like, for example, Backbone boilerplate, which is especially targeted for people using Backbone.js, maybe with Required.js. A lot of good things in there. Stuff that is more specific. And this is what we have with HTML5 boilerplate. In HTML5 boilerplate, we have hundreds of forks and extensions and frameworks and themes that are based on HTML5 boilerplate that use HTML5 boilerplate and extend from there. Basically, if you look at the wiki page, there are a lot of tools for each and every framework that you want to use within your project, right? That extend HTML5 boilerplate. Hello? Sorry, slide's not working. But the thing is, it's hard to find the choice, right? To find out what you really want within your team, what is the good starting point for you. And this is the current approach when it comes to point one, using a framework or a boilerplate. Now I want to talk a little bit about number two. What are the differences for you when it comes to utilizing such a framework? For example, if you use HTML5 boilerplate. As I said, it's the lowest common thing that you want to have within your project, maybe. But you need to add a build tool. You need to integrate your framework. You need to integrate a better structure that comes with your framework or that you want to have for the front end. And you need to integrate testing for the front end, right? And a lot of other things where you need to spend time to get it exactly right, the way you want it and that you need it within your team. If you look at more sophisticated frameworks that help you to show you a decent UI, you need to reuse a lot of code that you maybe not need for your smaller web project, for example. And in the small web project, your structure isn't as complicated as that. I think I took 10 by now. Whatever. Yeah, and maybe you have other coding guidelines than Bootstrap or Foundation have, and you want to apply them to this framework. And it's complicated, it takes time, again. And this is the thing that we have to face when we work with these frameworks, when we want to integrate them with our workflow and our preferences. We have analyzed these, and now we need to apply them, right? And this takes time. We have to get to work, we have to code, we have to do a lot of stuff before we even start with the real coding, and this is the final part, right? Doing the web project itself, which takes the most of the time. But until we get there, it took us a long way. The thing is, we want to remove this time-consuming thing. We want to code less to start our projects, as I said. If we look at HTML5 boilerplate, HTML5 boilerplate is a project that has, as I said, the minimum of good defaults for your web projects that you want to use. And these are the advantages, basically. You can start your project faster than when you go from point zero, if you have no code. You don't need to remove a lot of things because we don't have a lot of things in there that are not usable. Maybe there is like Google Analytics that you don't want to use. Maybe you don't want to use the Google API for jQuery and stuff like that. But it's not a lot because there isn't so much code. And the good thing about HTML5 boilerplate is that you can learn very much from the source. If you look at the source, it's each and every line has a lot of hard work in itself. Where developers from all over the globe thought about how can we make this starting point better for you to use without too much hassle to get started. But then there are the disadvantages. It needs a lot of opinionated work that is basically not in HTML5 boilerplate. You need to build a lot of things upon that. You need to extend the tasks that you want to use. And this takes time, right? Again. Let's look at what we need to use, because that's basically the thing that we need to talk about when it comes to finding a decent solution for your team or for yourself. Basically, you want to have a build tool within your front-end project, right? We want to maybe use preprocessors like SAS or LESS and stuff like that. We want to have a better structure, as I said before, and we want to use testing. And we need to put all of this into HTML5 boilerplate. Again, this takes a lot of time. But there are solutions in how we can tackle these problems that we face. That it becomes easier for us to get started and to reduce the boilerplate code we have to write. So the question is, should we go back to frameworks, for example? Should we go and use something like Foundation again? I would argue no, but there are people that would argue for yes, because it helps you a lot to get started easier. But you have to face the other problems I outlined before. And if we don't take the approach of using a framework that is already out there, we need to tackle all the problems that we defined earlier. For example, we have to use a build tool. Personally, I use Grunt.js, and you should too, I guess. Then there are preprocessors. These could be SAS, LESS, CoffeeScript, whatever. You can apply a structure as, for example, BAM or SMAX for CSS, and you need to have a structure for your JavaScript. You may want to use require.js and stuff like that. And as I said, you need to add testing with, for example, Jasmine, Mocha, and you want to have a test run like Karma, which is pretty awesome, by the way. The thing is, within your team, you don't want to do all this work, this time-consuming work, over and over again, because it just takes too long. That's why I would say just do it once and do it right. Stay dry. Don't repeat yourself, right? And then there is the thing which I have built personally for my opinionated workflow, which is called init. Init is a project that is on GitHub, and you can download it from there. And it is my personal starting point for projects that I want to have a good structure, where I want to have all the other things I said earlier. What we have in init, and I'm developing this with a friend of mine who also has the same opinions about how to write code and which tools to use and stuff like that. So we both thought it would be good to have grunt in there, right? Because we want to have a build step. We want to have tests with Jasmine in our case, and we want to have JS hint to show us a better coding style within our JavaScript. Then we have the scaffolding stuff, like some folders, some files that just help you to get started more quickly, that you don't want to start over and over, and you don't want to put the time into that. And because we thought there are a lot of smart people doing great work, for example, when it comes to components, which I will talk about a little bit later, then it would be good to have something like Bower. Bower is a package manager for the front end. You may have heard of like NPM for Node, or Ruby's Gem, I think it is, or Composer for PHP. And the same thing exists for the front end. You can just use it and use components with it, with just running one single line on your command line. And another thing which I think is very important is to help people that are not yet at the level that you are, by providing documentation, providing an argumentation why you chose to do something in a special way. For example, why you chose how to build your component within CSS, or why you chose to use required JS and not just blank vanilla JS. I don't know. But let's take a look. I talked a little bit about the theory, but what does it look like, right? So this project is on GitHub. As I said, you can just download it if you want to. We're currently working on version 1.0, and it will come out within the next weeks, hopefully. And I want to show you just how the basic init looks like and what you would start your project with. So you go on the GitHub page, you maybe press download the zip, and you get the whole package that is here. You have the most interesting thing, I guess, is the grunt file for me personally, because I like to dig the build steps I have and the tasks that surround my project and that my project is built within. So let's take a look at the grunt file. The grunt file basically has some default configuration that you can easily change. It's at the beginning of the file. You say where your JavaScript lays, right, and where you want to have it when you build your project. As in this case, for the JavaScript tasks, we have a destination that's dist/the version number, whatever. And then we have Sass configuration modernizer. We use modernizer because we extend HTML5 boilerplate, and modernizer is the best front-end detection library that exists, I guess. And then there is the real grunt configuration that you don't really have to understand in order to get your project up and running. And if we look at the tasks that we use, we have to look at this at the moment. It's JS hint, as I said. It's a modernizer build task. We have a Sass thingy in there which is pretty opinionated because people maybe want to use less. We have an image minimization thing task, and we need to copy over some stuff, but that's not relevant for you because you can just take what is in there if you think this is the right way to go. But let's look at some other things that we have in there. For example, we have integration in this case with Travis CI, which is pretty cool for continuous integration. You can also configure how Bower works for you, what components you want to use with Bower. In our case, we, for example, use jQuery or normalize from the Bower CD or from the repositories themselves, requiring them with Bower, which makes it pretty easy to update them. Yeah, and then there are some other things, as I said, the documentation. I just want to show you the documentation for a second, because I think, as I said, this is pretty important if you want to get people fast up and running within your project, right? So if you look at, for example, modules, you can find the box module, and I just said a couple of sentences what is maybe important when building modules, how you can define them, how you can document them, and stuff like that. Nothing really too fancy, right? But it's a thing that you have to think over and over again each time you start a project and that people come to your team. But there is a downside to init. Init is cool, but it chains you. It chains you to something that might not be the best for you, because it's what I think is best for me. And that's not true in every case. Maybe your team can't use Sass because you don't have Ruby installed on your servers or on your local machines, and you need to use less because you only have Node. Why so ever? I don't know. Maybe you use Windows. Gosh, right? Maybe you can't use like the image optimization stuff that we have in there. But take a look at it and take what you need and build your own init that works the way you need it. And then there are other tools that maybe go a step further than init does. As for example, Yeoman. Yeoman is a tool built by some open source people, mainly sponsored by Google, and it helps you a lot with scaffolding your application. For example, if you want to build upon Bootstrap, whysoever, just go on the command line and type in there, yo, Bootstrap, something like that, generate a Bootstrap. I don't know exactly. But you can check it out. Check it out. I would show you, but it's not my laptop, so I can't show you a thing on the command line at the moment. But check out Yeoman if you're interested in a more sophisticated workflow than, for example, init has, because it might help you with your projects. And when you build that thing, and you're up and running, and you know how to start your project right, for example, you use init, just throw it in, do some Bower install, npm install, and you're ready to go. Then you want to have like a sophisticated workflow for the front-end development, right? So not only for how you use tools like Grunt, but you also want to know how to build your code right. And this is where components kick in. I just want to talk a little bit about this, as I think it's pretty important that you think about the architecture of your front-end application. Components are the things on your web page that you can also call modules or widgets. But let me go a little bit into detail with the description Wikipedia gives us for components in software engineering. Component-based software engineering is a branch of software engineering that emphasizes the separation of concerns in respect of the wide-ranging functionality available throughout a given software system. And it continues with, it is a reuse-based approach to defining, implementing, and composing loosely coupled, independent components into systems. So what again, please? Components have a specific separation of concerns. They help you divide your code better within your team because they are loosely coupled, and I will go into that in a second. They are more independent to what you might build when you put code together too strong, where you have a really deep connection within modules. And if you leave that out and look at them as an independent thing in your web project, you can easily reuse them throughout, I don't know, other web pages that you build based on the same level. So what does this mean for the front end? Basically, components are the different parts on your page. If you look at each web page, you find a slider or something like that. This is a component. This can be a component. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is. I don't know. You have to define what a component is within your team. And you have to find out what it works best for you. Maybe a slider has 3 components within itself because there is a button on the slider and maybe a text box. I don't know. This is maybe for you, this is another component. But you can think of components or modules that they work the same way as jQuery plugins do. You take a jQuery plugin from any website, you throw it in your project, and boom, it works, right? You just copy over some HTML, and you're all set. And that's pretty cool. And you should build the same things for your web projects, because the main disadvantage with jQuery plugins that we have is that it throws in a lot of code that we don't want. And then we get to the point back from the beginning where we said we don't want to remove too much code and we don't want to add too much code. But if you build these components for your projects and for the exact need that you have within your team or for your web page, you are a lot faster when it comes to development. Some other advantages when you look at components, you can look at them without thinking about the context too much. Because if you put in a component maybe on in the main part of the page, it works perfectly if you build it right. And it works the same way in the sidebar, for example, where you want to have it a little bit more narrow. And this is the exact approach that helps you to define the responsiveness of this this element of this component in a better way. Also, you can easily give a component someone and say, "Hey, please build component X," and I build component Y in the same time. You can talk with each other, but everybody is independent and doesn't rely on other people's work. And this is something where it becomes fast for the development. And after that, when you're done with developing your components, you're even more faster because you can easily require these components within new projects that look exactly the same, that work exactly the same. And this enables you for faster maintenance, because if there is someone coming to your team and updating a component or updating some code, and he or she knows exactly where to go, in which files to look at this component, for this component, it gets a lot faster, and thus you have a better maintenance workflow. Big question here, when should we use components? I would argue in large websites, in large web applications. Maybe you would use them within style guides, because style guides are awesome. And you can just share these components that you built for your style guide within your real project. But this is a whole nother talk. Maybe also in small web projects, because it's fast. Because you can reuse the stuff you did for other projects. I don't know. So, again, I talked a little bit about the theory, but let's look a little bit about the practical things. When it comes to building components, you should always think of how minimal can you build a component that it is still useful for you, that you can combine it within your project with another component so that they don't get in their ways. On the one hand, it's the thing to think about the minimalism of the component. How small can you build it? But on the other hand, how flexible do you really need it? And this is exactly the crucial point where you have to look at and where you need to spend the time in that you saved when starting your project. The structure of a component is basically consists 3 main parts, mostly. Markup, styles, and functionality. And these translate one-to-one to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in the front end. Maybe you use some preprocessor, who cares, but basically it's these 3 points what define how a component looks like and what a component is. Just in a second, I want to show you this thing, this component I built, which basically is like a jQuery plugin without jQuery. It is a modal. It is a CSS modal. It's called CSS modal, and it looks like this all the time, right? But I wanted to have it working without JavaScript, optimized for mobile, and easily reusable as a component for smaller web projects, for example. So if you click on this link, it opens this modal. You all know this stuff. The cool thing is the code. Let's look at the code. This is how we build components these days, or should build components, or one approach, whatever. For example, we have the index HTML. If you look at this one, you will see that there is the markup that we define, or we can look at it at the web page. It's even more clear. Here you can see how the markup looks for this modal, right? Then we have the styles, the CSS. In my case, we built this with we built this with SCSS. So basically, there is the file with the styles in SCSS, some configuration, and then some modal styling. And down here, we have some variants for the modal. And this is exactly the 2 first parts of our building components workflow, right? And the third part is the JavaScript. In this case, we don't want to have too much JavaScript because it's a CSS modal, right? But there are some functions that we use that help us to stay accessible and stuff like that. And so we have the modal.js, which defines these things. And basically, if you use the CSS modal within your project, you can just use these 3 files. You have the markup, the styles, and the functionality. And you're up and running very fast with this component for each and every web page. And if you have defined one of these components, why not define everything like a component and build component libraries, user interface libraries? For example, Bootstrap is a perfect example of a user interface library. It just doesn't do what you want. It does what Bootstrap guys want, right? Again, build what you need. Build it for your web project. Don't build it for others. There are some downsides and some upsides and some downsides when it comes to component libraries, and this is exactly what this translates one-to-one the same in when it comes to starting projects. You can start very fast when you have basically defined a component library. They are easily reusable, but on the downside, maybe they add a lot of functionality that you don't need within one project, but within another. So look at it as like a basic idea. Maybe it's not always the best to define everything as a component. I don't know. And think about how to stay dry. Don't repeat the stuff you do. And this is the thing when it comes to looking at components without looking at their context, where you may fall into a hole where you maybe define stuff over and over again for each and every component. And this is where you should start with building a baseline for each component that you built within your component library. As for example, you can say, my components all have the dependency normalized CSS. All my components have the dependency jQuery, right? And then your component library gets a good or you get a good feeling about your component library because you stayed dry. So, in order to close this right now, let's do a short recap. Think about the workflow that you have within your teams. Think about what is the best approach for you to build. Try out init, try out Yeoman. Look at them just for a couple of minutes and just think about the stuff that you would need, right? Just clone the repository right now. You can get up and running with your projects within minutes. It's awesome. Find good defaults for yourself, as I said, within your team, and use what is out there, but only take the parts that you need, and not what everybody needs, right? Thanks a bunch.